Hi everyone, welcome to the channel. Today we're going to have another quick look at the second tier reward vehicles for World War II Chronicles, the Lorraine 155 MLE50 and the Whirlwind P.9. Now I know a lot of you have probably been excited for the Lorraine 155, but the Whirlwind really takes the torch in how these vehicles actually perform. The Lorraine is very difficult to use for a very glaring problem that we'll get into in a moment. But the Whirlwind is surprisingly a joy to fly, and if you're looking to get this as a grinder, you are really not going to be disappointed. Just a little disclaimer before we start though, I have been given these vehicles a week or so early, and you'll be able to get them in that time. But regardless, I am going to be participating in the rest of the Chronicle events, one because I'm a bit stupid, and two because I want the shiny camouflages that you can unlock by getting all 13 medals, so I am going to be slugging through it as well. I just so happen to get these vehicles early. Right, let's start with the Whirlwind. So, there's not really too much to look at the Whirlwind P9 in the hangar. Interestingly though, out of the two P9 prototype Whirlwinds, we have the less interesting one in-game. The L6844 and the 45 were the designations, and the 45 actually got a 37mm in the nose here, which would have made for a bit more of an interesting aircraft in my opinion. But regardless, we still have a really good functional one here. It's tier 3 and 4.0, even though the one in the normal tree is 4.3. This one is functionally identical in terms of flight performance, but functionally better in-game overall because of the guns. They are in a slightly different configuration and have a different feeding mechanism and have a lot more ammunition. These have 121 rounds per gun instead of the 60 rounds per gun the normal Whirlwind gets, which makes it a lot more versatile. The Whirlwind in the tree that we have runs out of ammunition after taking out one or two aircraft, and this one can take out a lot more, and it can go after bombers as well. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about how it works, how to use it, with some gameplay in the background as well. So the Whirlwind P9, it's very, very good, at least I think so, at its battle rating. In the few games I've played generally around 4.0, 4.3, and it does perform really, really well. It can outclimb nearly everything you can run into, and it can take out a lot more aircraft than the regular Whirlwind can, as you know, it has a lot more ammunition, which really, really makes it worth playing. I don't like the Whirlwind in the normal tree, and I flew it quite a lot to spade it recently, and I found that I only had ammunition really to take out one or two aircraft, so it really limited the effectiveness of the vehicle, like completely. Like there was a cut-off limit. The ammunition really hindered it. But this one doesn't have that hindrance. The flight model itself is pretty good. You know, it's relatively maneuverable for a heavy fighter. It climbs really well. It dives not too well. The dive isn't great, but it does have a lot of aggressive offensive advantages in its climb rate and its guns, as dive speed is more of a defensive advantage. So this is quite an aggressive aircraft. You can fly directly at enemies in the climb, and you're likely going to beat them in the climb, and you're going to be faster as well, so you can really take advantage of that. It's a really fun aircraft to use, and I really don't think you'll be disappointed if you get it. The downsides really are just that, you know, it is a heavy fighter, it's not really that maneuverable, and it's generally low speed. It's not a super fast aircraft, and generally heavy fighters are either balanced with their armament or their speed or anything like that. Not really their maneuverability, but maneuverability for this one, pretty good. But the only real disadvantage is the dive speed. Like, most other fighters can beat you in the dive, so if you are in a disadvantaged position, diving away isn't always the best thing to do, because you will likely get caught quite easily. But generally this has been a joy to fly. I think the Whirlwind itself, and especially this vehicle as an event vehicle, is going to be slept on quite a lot. As the Whirlwind in the original tree, you know, it came out at 5.0 where it was completely outclassed and it wasn't really worth using. So I think a lot of people just sort of pass this one up as, you know, another pointless heavy fighter. You know, the British haven't really had much luck with them. You know, the late bow fighters are kind of useless. The Mosquito isn't really that good either. But this one is, you know, a joy. at 4.0 it's fantastic. You know, it has the climb rate, it can take out bombers where the other Whirlwind couldn't because it just didn't have the ammunition, and it has the Hispano Mark 1s, which, you know, this might be personal preference, but in my experience with them, they are the most reliable Hispanos, and you have a lot of ammunition for them. So this is probably my favourite event vehicle so far, at least in terms of functionality. Maybe the T18 wins, but I'm not quite sure. I have really enjoyed playing this one. It's a joy to fly, and it makes a real difference from flying other heavy fighters in the game, because they are, generally speaking, not that good. But this one has a lot of offensive advantages, and it's just really fun. And I think you'd be missing out a lot if you skipped out on this one. So I'm glad I got it early, so I can hopefully say to you guys, you know, look, this is actually really good, even though it probably looks a bit boring just being a copy and paste model-wise, but it's really worth your time, and I think it's one that you should definitely pick up, especially if you're going to look to grind out the British tree. Right, the Lorraine 155. So this is the one I imagine most of you are looking forward to getting yourselves, and I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it's not really very good. As you might have noticed already, it actually has 0 degrees of gun depression, meaning that if you're on flat ground and there's an enemy a few hundred meters in front of you and they're not really that tall, you can't actually hit them. The only way of actually doing it is if you pivot the suspension by rocking back and forth and getting the gun down. And it does lead to some really frustrating engagements, because you can have an enemy in front of you and be unable to actually hit them. And it plays completely differently to any tank in the game because of this, and it's just really, really odd to play. Which is a shame, because apart from that, it's fantastic, it's incredibly quick, it's really mobile, and the gun is really, really fun. I've had so many amazing kills with this, it's just great, it's so satisfying to get kills with. Speaking of the gun, it is a 155, which is the second highest caliber in game, and gets 53mm of penetration on the HE shell. It does also get a smoke shell, but you know, there's not really too much point in using that because of the reload, which aced is 20 seconds. It also gets a 20mm, which kind of lacks in the penetration department. I think it has, well, I don't even know why it's that low. Most of them are about 40-45mm pen close range, but regardless, that gunner doesn't live very long anyway, as you can also see the armour is very poor. You might bounce a few off the hull, but it's not really something to rely on, as the armour up here is going to get chewed up by pretty much anything. You'll always pretty much lose the breach, I found, and you'll maybe survive the first shot, but you will lose 3 crew almost every time. As you can see here, they're all in a line on this side of the tank, so if you do happen to run into me or someone else using it early, shoot on this side of the gun, and it will completely wipe out the tank, and most likely knock out the breach as well. So, let's get into some further details with some gameplay too. Right, the Lorraine. Now, the gameplay I have in the background here was the first time I was on a urban map, and I thought, great, I can finally not get hindered by its lack of gun depression by playing with lots of hills and stuff. But I looked down the sight and I realised, oh, I can't aim the gun down enough to hit something coming around this corner. And then it kind of clicked that this tank isn't very good, and it was kind of depressing, because I was really excited to actually like this vehicle. But it just isn't as functional as you were hoping for, as well as all of us were hoping for, really. So the main way I've had success with it is flanking with it. It's really quick, and playing it mainly on maps that have lots of hills, defilades, things like that. As you know, you either need to be in a defilade shooting up, or slightly downturned on a hill where you can level the gun out. Like what I'm doing here is I'm just balancing myself on some rubble, so that I can actually hit what's going around the corner, because I can't really do anything else. You know, I can try rolling around and stopping and, you know, jutting the gun down to actually hit something in front of me, but it's not reliable, and it's not something that's always going to work anyway. So this tank only really works on some maps, which is quite a big shame, and it's sadly not that stealthy either. It's just a little bit taller than the KV2, and it's quite a big target as well. It's a bit of a box, as you can see. And it's just, I don't want to say it's a pain to play, but it's not constantly fun. You know, I was expecting a vehicle that was constantly fun. You know, you can go around using the HE to just kind of dunk on people all over the map and have a good time, but sadly that just isn't how it works, and I'm sorry to have to say that. Onto the benefits though, when this tank's gun hits, it bloody hits hard, and it's never going to get old. You know, hitting a tank with HE, it's never going to get old, and it is very, very satisfying to do. But, you know, as a grinder, not that great. And the main thing that's a disappointment with it for me is that it's not reliable fun. You know, with the KV2 or something like that, like Sturmpanzer, you know, it's pretty reliable fun unless you do something silly. With this one it's not, because you can be in a situation where the tank will not work. And that just happens to be most of the situations that you'll find yourself in, which is, you know, a massive shame. But the best thing really, I guess, is its speed. I mean, at 4.3, you're going to be one of the quickest things on the battlefield, really, at that tier, and you can get to spots quicker than anything else, really. So if you can find a spot where you can depress the gun in a defilade or something like that, you're going to have a good time, because you're going to have people rolling up to you. And on the same remit, you know, it can deal with pretty much everything. You're not going to struggle to knock out any tank, really. I might be wrong, but at least from the high caliber guns, I think it has the highest performance of HE so far, which is really, really good. You know, that really makes the vehicle for me. The gun is powerful and the gun does work. The 20mm isn't amazing at shooting down aircraft, simply because its elevation isn't great, but if you have something flying quite low and directly at you, you can hit it. So this one is a bit weird. It's map dependent, and you're not always going to be able to use it as effectively as you might hope. And, you know, it's a big shame. I know I keep saying it, but, you know, I was excited to, you know, say this vehicle's great, grind for it, it's going to be great, but it's just, it's not that reliable. And, you know, I don't want to dissuade you from getting it, because what I'm talking about here probably seems like it's not worth your time, but I would still say it is. You know, it's a very unique vehicle. And then it's a, you know, a derp gun, but it's also really, really quick as well. And it just makes for a fun experience, but not all the time, if you can get what I'm trying to say here. So I think it's still worth grinding for. You will have fun with it, but it is going to be quite selective fun. But it is satisfying. You know, you're not going to have a great time playing it, but you're not going to have a terrible time playing it either. So it's up to you really if you think it's worth a grind. I would say it is, just because it is really unique, and we're probably not going to get a vehicle like this again for quite a long time. So I think it's still going to be worth it. As long as you can find yourself a spot on a map where you can actually hit things, you're going to have fun. You know, and I guess that's the drawback of it being at such a low battle rating. You know, the speed is almost unparalleled really. You're going to outperform anything in that regard. So, you know, you've got to use your initiative, you've got to find like a cheeky spot to hide in, and if you can do that, you are going to have fun. And I really hope that most of you still do go and get this vehicle, because I've had more fun with it than I've had frustration with it. You know, I have had situations where, you know, I could have killed the tank if I was in literally any other tank in the game, but apart from that, I've still had more fun playing it than I would have had otherwise. But even so, I think it's important to stress the difficulty of this vehicle, that, you know, it's not easy to use, and if you are spending lots and lots of time grinding for it in the events, I'm not completely sure that it's going to be a tank for everyone. So if you take these drawbacks and, you know, really think about it and think, is this tank worth it for you? So it might be worth it for some of you, it might not be worth it for others. I wouldn't say it's a good grinder, but it is just good fun if you want to, like, just play about with your friends or something like that. So it's really down to your own preference whether you think the vehicle is worth your time. I can't say fundamentally whether it is or isn't, because, you know, mainly because I like collecting everything, but at the same time it works. It doesn't work all the time, but it works, and it's fun, and it's unique, and it's special. But if you wanted like an easy, you know, derp gun or something like that, that's not what this tank is. So don't let me dissuade you completely from getting it. You guys are going to have to come to your own conclusion with it, as it's not a tank that every player can just pick up and play and have a good time. So it is completely up to you, and hopefully I've shown enough of this vehicle to whether you can kind of work out if it's going to be a vehicle for you or not. Just a disclaimer here before we finish up, in that the stats for the Lorraine could be subject to change. I mean, I know it's not like the dev server where you can't really believe everything at all. This tank is on the live server and this is how it's playing, so I can only give you that information. But seeing as it is an event vehicle that takes a lot of people's time and or money, I think Gaijin will probably be kinder to it, and they may along the line, I don't know, but they may give it some gun depression. I think they probably will. They've done similar things like this before with the BM13, the Katusha truck, giving it suspension control so it can fire at stuff in front of it. And I think, seeing as this vehicle is in some situations basically unplayable, I think that Gaijin will probably be forced to give it some gun depression. So take it with a pinch of salt. This is how it is now. They might change it, I don't know, but I just want to say that it is a possibility. So again, I don't want to dissuade you from getting it, because I think you should get it. And I think it's far from out of the question that a change could be made to the Lorraine's gun depression, and I think it might have to be. But again, don't take my word for it. I'm only giving the information that I have and the statistics that I can show you in game right now. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. As for the last video as well, if you have any questions, please put them in the comments below. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And a review on these two vehicles will be coming out when everyone can unlock them for themselves. So, it's a bit closer to the time and people can have the information when it's relevant. So, thank you very much for watching, guys. Really hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.